After the events of the previous episodes, between Ellis lying to Everly, to Anastasia walking in on Ellis and Sunday having sex, Ellis realizes that in order for him and Sunday to move forward, she has to meet Anastasia. She has to meet Danny. She has to meet Bree and also Everly, who makes it clear that becoming one big happy family is definitely going to be a bit of a challenge, but Sunday says she's willing to have patience, so that's going to get tested. I'm saying it 7 different ways, and I'm so proud of myself. Now, before Ellis can even ask Sunday over for family dinner, she's dealing with her own family issues. Envy is at the point where his short-term memory is starting to fail, and his long-term memory as well. And because of that, him continuously rejecting any type of aid beyond Lynette and also Sunday is becoming a bigger and bigger problem. It's been established that he's not going to move and sell his house. He refuses to have outside help. And to make things worse, Lynette and Sunday aren't on the same page. Potentially because Lynette got so much help from Envy when it came to raising her boys that she doesn't want to do a disservice or insult the man who did so much for her. So with that, she rather enable him, make it seem like things aren't as bad as Sunday wants it to appear, even though it's becoming increasingly clear, at least to us and Sunday, that right now it's potentially manageable and we're getting warning shots, but something needs to be set up down the line for this to not become a real big, possibly traumatic issue. When it comes to Sunday meeting Ellis's kids, it's one of the things she tries to prep for the best she can. And also, she's not alone since Anastasia is also prepping for the situation. Now, in Sunday's case, she decides to buy some gifts for Bree, inevitably based off of what Ellis has said. In terms of Anastasia, knowing that when it comes to Sunday, she's has this vegan collective thing, vegetarian rather, she decides to make vegan mac and cheese as part of the meal. Now, when it comes to the adults, things are relatively fine. Sunday is greeted by Danny, who decides he wants to play a little game with her, but for the most part, he's cool. Though, as we'll go into later, he seems cool mostly because he doesn't really say or do much. I mean, he peeps Ellis's and Sunday's chemistry, and that seems to make him step up a bit when it comes to showing Anastasia affection, but how exactly we should take that is hard to say since, again, the man is there, but he's not really participating. However, when it comes to Ellis's kids, they strangely are the ones we see the most of when it comes to this episode. Starting off with the easier one, we have Bree, who pretty much takes to Sunday immediately. She embraces her with a hug, introduces herself, takes Sunday up to her room to show off the dollhouse that Ellis made her. They talk about mythology, the meaning of their names, and it comes to the point where when it's time to eat, Bree wants to sit next to Sunday and continue their conversation. She doesn't want to sit next to her dad. She doesn't want to sit next to her mom, Danny. No, it is all about Sunday. And Sunday really loves and appreciates it because with Ellis introducing Sunday as his girlfriend and her getting along with his youngest, checkbox. Add in that Bree decides to ask those questions like, hey, are you two going to get married? It shows that not only is Ellis invested in the long term and in their relationship, but Bree is as well, which is a beautiful thing. Everly, on the other hand, she originally just gives Sunday the cold shoulder and, is cordial, but definitely not polite. But as the night wears on, it gets worse. Now, because Everly thought she was slick, she invites her little boyfriend Jesse over, thinking maybe he'll co-sign or enable the situation, but between him looking at Ellis and realizing this ain't the time to play them games, and then also him likely wanting to make a good impression, when Everly really decides to show her behind by coming at Sunday with subtle shots, or even dropping the gift that Sunday gave her in the trash, you can tell this boy is not trying to enable or even co-sign what she's doing. He finds her to be acting very rude and out of pocket, and you can potentially see that with him not supporting her, that might feed into some of the issues that she has that are ongoing and maybe haven't hit the surface, or else are not something Ellis is fully aware of anymore, or else things he might have thought that she moved past. But while she does apologize to Sunday, and it seems that Ellis believes that in time she'll come around, while he's optimistic, I as a feel like as a realist that he is not fully taking note of all that she's going through, and how much that him dating, and how much she's still probably trying to get past her mom's abandonment is affecting her. To start off for the highlights, I want to go into Bree and Sunday first, and that's just because their dynamic doesn't feel like something that's the norm. We don't really get to see a little girl, much as a little black girl like Bree, interact with a grown woman like Sunday, and have this sort of back and forth, which is not only cute because of she's this little adorable little kid showing off a dollhouse, but then it goes into things like mythology, goes into name meaning, and the way that Bree is developed, she doesn't have this like I'm this precocious little kid who's just oh so smart. Never mind, she doesn't have that kind of sass, with the little comedy thing. Instead, she kind of doesn't fit into that mold we usually see for little girls, especially black girls, and the way that Samantha Wilson plays her makes you hope that even though Warner Brothers Discovery seems to be backing away from children's programming, hopefully something like a David Makes Man or something like that can cast her, because while it's too soon to tell, because I think this is like one of her first major roles, there is always a possibility that after the Keke Palmers and Deas and even Marcy Martins, she could perhaps be part of that next generation that takes up the mantle. But the second highlight is, for us, it's Everly, and the reason that she's a highlight for us is that in some ways you can kind of see with meeting Ellis's kids, you get the full spectrum of what it means to date somebody who has kids. Optimism would have you think that they'll potentially be like Bree, where embrace you with open arms and try to build a relationship with you outside of the parent, because essentially, if you're going to be around all the time, you can't just be there. As we saw Danny, you're going to have to participate, and they're going to want you to be part of their lives since you're part of their parents' life, and eventually become one big happy family. But on the opposite end, you could have the pessimistic view of dating someone who has kids, which is Everly, where as much as I'm going to go into why I understand why Everly's acting the way she is, at the same time, you can see why kids like that could perhaps make you hesitant. Now, in Everly's defense, take note that her mother, the way that Ellis made it seem, abandoned her and her sister for this man for the sake of her career. Not because they were in love and it was a long time coming and her and Ellis were ending and they had a bad relationship, but it seems, again, the way Ellis painted things thus far, she wanted to be selfish. She found a man who could take her career to the next level, so bam, she's out the door. And yes, it seems that her and Everly are building towards a parent relationship, but the scars are not fully healed yet. So with that in mind, take note that Ellis is now the custodial parent. He's the consistent parent. He's the one that's coming to all her games and everything, and pretty much being how Sunday portrays Envy. He is her hero, her cheerleader. He is not necessarily her everything, but even with Jesse potentially being Everly's boyfriend, you have to recognize that Ellis's place in her life has not diminished to the point where he's just the old man who pays the bills. So with that in mind, you can understand why she's perhaps triggered in a way and thinking that just like her mom abandoned her for somebody else, that maybe Ellis may do the same. And then when you add in that Ellis has a previous relationship with Sunday, it could mean that the process is going to be hastened. Never mind, you have to also factor in that, yes, neither Sunday nor Anastasia are necessarily the youngest people, but at the same time, there is the potential that they can start new families with their prospective partners. So while Bree could easily integrate into these new families because she's young, loving, and adaptable, Everly, granted, she's only a teenager, so saying she's set in her ways is maybe taking it a bit far, but you can imagine that since she's a little bit more prickly, if her mom and Danny have a new kid, and then if Ellis and Sunday have a new kid, how much that's going to take away from her having any time or affection from her parents. Never mind, let's not forget that Sunday lives off in Atlanta. And from the dinner table, we saw, well, we didn't, yeah, we saw and heard that Ellis already chose Sunday over Everly already. And that was for something small like him coming to a scrimmage game or watching the scrimmage game. So if he decides to pick Sunday over her for little things like that, imagine when it comes to the bigger things. Like, yes, I'm sure that Everly may know that he dropped everything for Anastasia and Bree when they got stranded out in Alabama, but while he did that for Bree, you know that she may be thinking, yeah, that's Bree. That's the little one who's his favorite, who's all lovable and kind. Will I be given the same type of emergency response when I have an issue? And then, considering that, let's add things up. Her mom abandoned her. Her dad, she may feels like is abandoning her. And then Jesse, this boy who she brought perhaps for reinforcement, he did not support her in her time of need and didn't enable her, co-sign her, console her. So you can see that there's a pattern forming that could perhaps cause more issues down the line. And maybe this is me pretending like I took more than one psychological class in college, but I feel that there is the potential of this whole plot when it comes to Everly showing you not just the worst case scenario when you're dating someone with a kid, but also allowing you to see what the kid is feeling so that you understand why they respond to you in this kind of way. So, for the on the fence topic, the issue that we're having was Danny. Danny is the person who, despite Anastasia painting the picture that Ellis is a great man, he was a good husband, and he clearly a great father, she still cheated on him with Danny, but outside of what he could possibly do for her career, it's not necessarily clear why. I mean, granted, does Danny say or do anything bad? No. But at the same time, he doesn't say or do anything notable either. I mean, he peeps the chemistry between Sunday and Ellis, and it seems to make him step his game up a little bit and be affectionate toward Anastasia, but beyond that, what can you really learn about this man besides he has a slight sense of humor? On top of that, a part of me also wants to kind of figure out what kind of man is able to be with someone who he probably knew was in a marriage, never mind that Anastasia had kids, yet he still ended up creating dysfunction in that relationship and eventually breaking it apart. And granted, I recognize that when it comes to Cherish today, especially season 2, it doesn't seem like they really want to foster that soap opera drama type of issue. Hence why we're at the point where things have pretty much cooled down and Ellis, Danny, and Anastasia are able to co-parent like they do, but it's hard to not want to have some sense of what drama came about for this piece to be established, just because, again, the way that Ellis has talked about Anastasia and the way that you see Anastasia, it's hard to not want to damn them in a way, but again, as we said with Everly, there is this push for you to give people grace, for understanding, for empathy in a way that, as much as you recognize surface level, they can be very easy to hate. At the same time, Cherish Today wants you to recognize that they're human, they make mistakes, they have reactions that can come off very impulsive, and you have to understand that for some of them, it's because feelings are overwhelming. When it comes to Everly, she's a teenager. She's going through her parents' divorce, which is the first time she's probably dealing with a major breakup, and it's not just her parents breaking up, it's the breakup of her family, the breakup of her relationship with her mom, perhaps to be loyal to her dad. So with that in mind, it's a lot for her to deal with. Then when it comes to Anastasia, let's not forget she was supportive of Ellis's dreams for a long time, so she kind of held herself back and was on pause. And then yes, he did return the favor, and he kind of, with his stuff set up now, gave her the allowance and all the time and energy that she needed so that she can get her stuff together. But perhaps the best way to put it is that Just because somebody helped you on your journey doesn't mean they're gonna be with you at the end of the journey, or else at each major signpost. And perhaps that's where Anastasia was. As a housewife, her and Ellis were at a good place where she could be the wife that he needed and she could be happy with being his wife. But once she became a singer and she became a successful singer, friendship seemed to be more what she needed out of Ellis more than the relationship. And so, while the transition was definitely a bit dirty and rough, she made a transition so that she can find the type of joy that she deserves rather than stay in a relationship hoping it works, suffer, her kids see it, and then, eventually break up with Ellis, perhaps after she loses the opportunity to be with Danny or even other men who she crosses paths with. Overall, it was a bit of a surprise twist to have this episode not be about getting to know Danny and seeing his dynamic with Anastasia and Ellis, and rather being about Sunday's dynamic with Bree and Everly. But because the show decided to focus on the kids and kind of give you a taste of what it means to date someone with kids, it allowed the type of space and allowance for the actresses who play Bree and Everly to get to showcase their talents a little bit, have you feel something for their characters, while, based off of previews for the next episode, kind of put Danny on the back burner so that, he can still get his moment in the sun, but, give the kids some time to really show themselves off, especially since I believe for Bree's actress is one of her first major roles, and then for Everly's, probably the first one that, no, I think she was in Night Power or something, but in terms of something that's not on a premium station, we have to pay extra for it. This is probably one of her biggest roles thus far.